You started with the statement about renaming the military bases. If Congress were to send over, say, the defense authorization with language that were to rename one of these bases for someone who, say, was a general who won the Civil War, would the president veto the defense authorization?
The president will not be signing legislation that renames America's forts.
That was Kayleigh McEnany at a press conference Wednesday, fielding questions from reporters after the president unexpectedly fired off a series of tweets indicating his fury at the idea that we'd rename military forts currently named for Confederate generals. The outburst came as a surprise even to the Republicans on the Senate Armed Services Committee, who voted that day to require the Pentagon to rename almost a dozen bases within 3 years. The Republican majority in the Senate means the GOP controls that committee, which means a majority of Republicans on that venerated panel actually agreed with the idea, as did the Defense Secretary and the Army Secretary. Trump was furious. It has been suggested that we should rename as many as 10 of our legendary military bases, such as Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Fort Hood in Texas, Fort Benning in Georgia, etc. These monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a great American heritage and a history of winning, victory, and freedom. The United States of America trained and deployed our heroes on these hallowed grounds and won 2 world wars. Therefore, my administration will not even consider the renaming of these magnificent and fabled military installations. Our history as the greatest nation in the world will not be tampered with. Respect our military. Of course, the soldiers who came from those forts long after they were named did win 2 world wars. But the generals from whom the bases take their names lost their war, the Civil War. There's definitely a history of winning by the soldiers that have come since, but no such history is attached to the names affixed on the entrances. But this act of defiance by the president isn't just another example of his seeming inability to stop doing and saying horribly racist things. The vote from the Armed Services Committee came as part of a larger spending bill from which soldiers get their pay raises, among other appropriations. In other words, Trump is so outraged by this effort that he's threatening to withhold the pay of the U.S. military in order to prevent it from happening. Even if Trump didn't make it clear that his intent was to veto the legislation if it contained the renaming language, his press secretary certainly did at the briefing when she specifically said he wouldn't be signing any legislation that did any such thing. It's not like it's outside the realm of possibility that America begins to move forward in terms of racial justice. After all, even the pointedly conservative sport of NASCAR racing just announced a ban on the display of Confederate flags at any and all events. Statues and memorials across the country, even in states that weren't part of the Confederacy that still erected those monuments, they're coming down. But I'm pretty sure Trump's upset about that as well. Because you see, the closer we get to some sort of reconciliation with our sordid racial history in America, the more Trump and people like Trump lose their voting base. Because that base is primarily made up of those who are terrified of losing their position in the world. Folks like this, they're not even sure if they hate black people. They just know they never want to be treated like them.